Good afternoon, everybody. It's just 2 o'clock now, so I was gonna go ahead and get started, not to waste any of your time on this incredibly beautiful day. Thank you for taking the time to join Marcy and I. I am recording and it'll be available later for those that need to know that information. Also, as the host of the meeting, I have the ability to mute everybody, which I've currently done. If you at any point want to ask a question or interrupt, please do. I don't want you to hesitate on doing that. And you should be able to unmute yourself. The little microphone next to your name down towards the bottom left of your screen is where it should be located. Will unmute or mute yourself. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. My name is Nicole Medor, even though it says Leanne Larson in the little screen up there, that's just for fun. I'm the early childhood specialist at the Maine Department of Education. And I have my colleague on with me as well. I'll let her introduce herself. Marcy, can you do that for us?
Hey everybody, good afternoon. Thanks for being here. I'm super excited about today's PD session.
Great. So we have been talking about sort of an overarching umbrella topic of challenging behaviors that I know many of you are familiar with, right? You wouldn't be here if you didn't know what we were talking about. So we had our first session around active supervision. Marcy guided us through a conversation of adults in the room with young children and where our priorities lie in that and why that would benefit all children, especially those that might be experiencing some challenging behaviors. Last Wednesday, we went ahead and dove in a little deeper into classroom factors. So looking at, well, specifically for Marcy and I, we come from the public pre-K lens, but I hope that that discussion around classroom factors gave you sort of a broader view, a broader idea of what we're talking about just in settings in general, whether it's a public classroom setting, a private childcare, a special purpose classroom, whatever it may be, the factors that are involved in those places and what it may or may not be doing to inhibit or potentially cause challenging behaviors. So today we're going to take that, keep that in mind, and we're going to move to child interactions. So again, this topic is huge. We're not going to solve challenging behaviors in these 5 one-hour courses, right? These are just simply conversations and topics to sort of stretch your thinking, stretch your mind, keep you in the game while we're all in this closure and potentially not seeing our students. So is everybody seeing my PowerPoint screen that has the cover, Uncover the Roots of Challenging Behaviors, that screen? Excellent, thank you for the thumbs up from some of you. So I'm gonna use this to guide our conversation. Also, I have a short video clip that we're gonna watch today. So I'm gonna toggle between the two when the time comes. So go ahead and get started. All right, so your students, or your student, let's get real. So everybody's going to need a piece of paper and something to write with real quick. Don't fret if you don't have that within arm's reach, no problem. But sort of just take a moment. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to write down the name or the names of your students, as many as you can in 60 seconds. And if you only work with one student, then think about other students that you've had experience with or that you know of or that you've worked with in the past. Any child that sort of comes to mind to you in 60 seconds, okay? So go ahead and do that now.
While we're waiting for everybody to write down their students' names, Lynn has asked if this refers to chapter 3.
Chapter 3, oh, in the book. I'll get to that in just a minute, thank you.
Thanks.
About 20 more seconds. Five, So now looking at the list that you've generated, pick one, any one, and think back about some very specific interactions you've had with that student. Some might make you smile and bring back a good memory, and some might make you cringe. That's okay. So just 10, 15 seconds to think about some of those interactions. Okay. Now, next to that student's name on your paper, if you can, we're going to make some tally marks. But you're going to have sort of two columns of that. So we're going to have a column for positive interactions with that student, and then another column for maybe negative or cringeworthy interactions with that student. So for every memory that you were just thinking of, mark down if it was a positive interaction that made you smile and made the child feel good, or if it was a cringeworthy interaction. So go ahead and take a minute and do that now. And I should have said, we're not going to share this necessarily, so don't hold back from being honest on your paper. Okay, is that enough time, you think? Folks good? Okay, so last session, I was able to pull up a poll. It worked really successfully for some and not so successfully for others, and that's okay. We're going to do it again. There's just 2 questions on it. So if it works, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, it's okay. Just kind of keep it in your mind. So we're going to take a minute and look at those tally marks that you just put on your paper. And we're going to sort of think about what is it about the interaction with the child that makes it positive or negative, and how do you know? But first, let's do the poll. And remember, this poll is anonymous, so I cannot see who is responding how. It's completely anonymous. Okay, you should see that on your screen now. So look at your positive interaction tally marks. How many did you recall in that short amount of time? And then number 2 is to look at those cringeworthy tally marks and see how many were there. I still have them coming in quick, so I'm going to leave it up for just a few more seconds. About 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the polling and share the results. Okay, can everybody see that? Some blue and orange bar graph looking lines. So the number 1 question, look at your positive interactions your positive interaction tally marks, and how many did you recall? So overall, I think we had about almost 80 folks chime in on this poll. The most was 4 to 7 tally marks. Okay, so over the course of the time that you've interacted with that specific child, 4 to 7 of those that you could recall were positive. We had a few that were more than 10, a few 0 to 3s. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, and then the second one, look at your cringeworthy tally marks and how many were there. And again, 4 to 7 that you recalled. I am happy to see that there's much less in the more than 10 spot. It wasn't, sometimes you're just not quite sure where this is going to go. So those that are potentially watching this recording later, Obviously, we're not able to participate in the polls, but hopefully you can take this information and relate it back to your experiences as well. Okay, so now I just want to talk about, let me get this out of the way, this question that I have posed. To just take a minute and looking at your tally marks, thinking about those interactions, and if any of you are brave in the chat box or to go ahead and unmute yourself, give me some things that you're thinking about as far as what it is about an interaction with a child that makes it, let's go with positive first. How do you know, or what makes that interaction a positive experience for you and for the child?
A moment where he or she is proud and you can talk about their achievement.
Okay, so tell me more about that, Holly. How do you know that they're proud? What is it about the things they're saying or the things they're doing that make you, the adults, think he's proud or she's proud?
Well, they may not necessarily know that what they did is something positive until you bring it to their attention. And I think it's more of that reflection piece of, oh, you know, I did something really well that gives them that feeling, not necessarily that they did it and they necessarily think that, but that you reinforced that.
Perfect. Yeah, I love that answer. Great. So for those of you that have can see the chat box, those are coming in like rapid fire. So I'm just going to go through a couple of those too. A few are talking about when the adult and or the child are smiling, right? So that physical clue, that physical body language that's saying, that looks pleasant, you're smiling, there might be close contact, eye contact, things like that. Perfect. When the child learns from a conversation or learns something, when I have the whole attention of a child, okay, that's difficult to do sometimes. Another one with a smile. Wants to continue working or might even have a physical hug or some type of physical contact. That's a positive interaction. So Anne-Marie, I agree. It's a feeling, right? The body language, right? You just know. You know when that child turns and walks away that they are feeling good about themselves or about whatever the conversation was you were having. Smiling and willing to work, making a connection. Yeah. So a lot of these that folks are chiming in on. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down real quick to see if I miss anything. Are pointing us back to, and correct me if you disagree with me, right? Challenge my thinking here. But I would argue that this is pointing to a positive interaction leads to or stems from a positive relationship, right? I don't just go around Hannaford hugging people and smiling with them, right? If I know them, I'm having a positive interaction with them, I'm starting to build a relationship. If I'm in Hannaford and I bump into my mom, that's a little different, right? I have a strong relationship with my mom, so she and I are going to have a much different interaction than I would with somebody that I'm unfamiliar with, a stranger, or somebody whose body language is telling me to not approach them, right? So if I'm a child in a classroom and the adult in my presence, or the adult, depending on where the setting is, has this sort of aura or body language of don't approach, right? Then the child is likely going to have this aura of ditto. I don't want to talk to you, you don't want to talk to me. This relationship is not jiving, right? So these things that are coming up in the group chat and what Holly mentioned out loud is around this relationship building, this feeling, this connection, this interaction that we're creating, okay? Whether it's a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, it's the relationship that you have with them. And those are hard to make, right? Some children, and we'll get to this in another session, some children are just hard to connect with, but that doesn't mean we stop trying, okay? So now let's flip the switch a little bit. So take a minute, look at your tally marks. What is it about an interaction with a child that you know was negative? What was it about it that made you feel like it wasn't going the way you needed it to go? Mhm. Yeah, so I'm just scrolling through the chat box. There's a lot coming in there. So some of the things coming up for folks here, and I totally agree with. So there's that lack of eye contact, right? Obviously, the opposite of what we were just talking about is going to come up. Their physical body language, again, slumped shoulders, right? They might act out by striking, hitting, right? Showing signs of aggression. Refusal, good one. Yeah, that can be a very negative interaction. Or refusal could be the result of a negative interaction even. Feelings of frustration, not willing to move forward, disruptive. Yeah, child will shut down, sure. Result in negative behavior, yeah. Yep, screaming, throwing, yep. So this is what we're talking about often when we say challenging behaviors. When they disclose something that happened at home, yeah, that could have a negative feeling. The tone of their voice, excellent one, yes, for sure. You can tell the same as adults can tell with adults. The tone of your voice, the speed of your talk, signals something for someone. Okay, good. Right, so I agree with everything that's coming up in the chat room around that. So now we're sort of tasked as the adult and as the educator for this child to sort of flip the switch on these interactions, right? We want to have that poll be more than 10 positive interactions, 0 to 3 negative interactions, right? We don't want the reason for an interaction with a child to be negative to be our fault. And that's hard. That, like I was saying before, working in education can be incredibly frustrating and incredibly draining. And then when we have children that need a number of supports, be it educationally, academically, behaviorally, whatever it may be, that's just one more thing that us as educators need to support. And it can be a lot. It can be a big load. So remember last time I was saying we need to remain empathetic, and we need a space to vent and to let go of that. So that if we end the day on Monday with a child in a negative way, right? We parted ways, he got on the bus, and it was not, we were just leaving from an aggressive situation. And then we come back to work on Tuesday with that still there, it's gonna show, and it's gonna come up in your interaction with that child. Whereas if we, as the adult, can flip that and try and remain really mindful of what we're bringing to the table, then we might just be able to turn those interactions to be more positive. Is there anything left in the chat box that I don't want to miss? Or any questions, concerns around that? Yeah. Oh, Holly brings up the point in the chat box about debriefing with the child after de-escalation helps. I just did this as a mom last night, right? I lost my cool. I was stressed to the max. I, had like an outburst with my child. And then a moment later, I had to go back and say, you know what? I'm really sorry that I did that. That wasn't your fault. I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed, frustrated, whatever it may be. And I'm sorry that timing wasn't right for us. Okay, start over. Right? Kiss on the cheek. I'm not going to do that to your student, probably, but, and moving on.
So real quick on the debriefing, which I do think is a great idea, but also be very mindful of the timing after the escalation happens, because if you're trying to debrief with a child too quickly or somebody who's not ready, depending on what the situation was, can actually be more of a trigger and send them back into a place of escalation. So it's really important to be mindful of the child's sort of frame of mind and how the de-escalation happens, and make sure that they're ready also, because the last thing you want to do is re-trigger that situation.
Yes, thank you, Marcy. Perfect. Okay. Just trying to move my PowerPoint. Okay. Oh, we just did that. Sorry, I moved ahead too far. Okay, so now I'm going to stop sharing this screen and share a different screen with you. So this is a TED Talk. It's a almost 20-minute long TED Talk by Dr. Stuart Ablon. And I highly, highly recommend it if you have time later to watch the full talk. We're just going to watch a snippet of it today. And to be honest with you, it was really hard to find like the right chunk of time to share with you. So I do recommend going back. It's right on YouTube. And I think if you, in the YouTube search bar, just type in Rethinking Challenging Kids, this certainly should be one of the top videos to show up. And his name is J. Stuart Ablon. It's here at the bottom. So we're just going to watch a snippet about his, I'm not going to give it away. Anyway.
Amazing things happen when adults shift from kids do well if they want it to kids do well if they can, to this is a deficit of skill, not will, to we got to help them build those skills. And how are we going to do that? By collaborating with them to solve problems so that they can build those skills. That's a pretty simple process. In essence, it's using a good deal of empathy to identify what a kid's concern is about a problem. It's then sharing your concern about that problem, not your solution, but your concern. And then it's inviting the child to collaborate with you to brainstorm solutions that are mutually satisfactory. And baked into those simple ingredients is a ton of practice in problem solving, flexibility, and frustration tolerance. And it's a process that can be used with little kids over little problems, big kids, big problems, you name it.
Okay, so one thing that he mentions here, that if you watch the whole thing in the beginning, he explains it really well, but he talks about the child and their ability to want to behave well, to want a positive interaction, and whether or not they can. So it's sort of hard to describe. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it's this really interesting sort of mind shift in our interactions with children and asking ourselves, reminding ourselves that if a child with challenging behaviors, they don't want to act that way, right? It's that they can't find it in them to behave, right? So if we're talking specifically around children with aggressive behaviors and outbursts and disruptive behaviors, things like that, it's not that they can't behave, right? It is that it's so hard to describe. You have to watch the video to see what he means. But it's this whole idea around skill versus will, want versus can, okay? So that collaborative interaction with children, modeling the language with them, modeling the behavior for them, and remaining positive during those.
I haven't watched the whole video yet, but I would say that it's about always going into a situation with a child, assuming that they have not had the experience and need to be taught from skill one. So they don't have the words, they don't have the body language, they don't have the interpretation skills, because most of them really don't. So it's not like Nicole said, it's not that they don't want to be acting like that. They don't know, they haven't learned anything differently. And also from the chat room, could you throw the link to that video into the chat box so it's easier to find later?
I'll do that right
Thanks.
now. There you go. Okay, so we should be back onto the PowerPoint screen now, right? So Dr. Ablon reminds us that collaborating with kids will help identify the problem for the child. So that empathy piece. So when you're interacting with the child and you're talking about something that's gone wrong or a behavior that they're expressing, right? Having empathy for why they're expressing that, asking yourself what happened before this, what could possibly be triggering this, and then chatting with them about it to help identify what the problem is for the child. So in this video, he goes on to give an example in the home with getting ready for school and get out the door in the morning, right? And that the child is really struggling to do so in a timely manner. The family's consistently late. Mom and dad are consistently yelling at him to get going, come on, it's slowing us down, this and that, right? And then, so this idea of identifying the problem with the child, just sitting down and chatting with them and saying, hey, look, the mornings are really hectic. We've got to get out the door. There's you, there's me, there's dad, there's brother, sister, whomever else. And I've noticed that you're having a hard time getting ready and coming down with all of us. Okay, so what's the problem? What's happening with you? And in the video, the child says, I don't want to be last. And he's like, you don't want to be last? Is it a race? Is that what the problem is? Are you thinking that we're racing? No. Okay, it's not a race. Okay, well, tell me more about you don't want to be last. I don't want to be the last one upstairs. Oh, okay. Are you nervous about being upstairs? Right, so just talking back and forth, reiterating what the child is saying to you so that you can show them that you're hearing them, you understand, trying to sort of make sense to it for them, okay? And then that interaction is going to allow us to share our concern. So the next step in his example is that the parent says, okay, well, I hear you. You don't want to be the last one upstairs. So the problem on my end is that, we've all got to get out the door. We've got to be somewhere on time. And when we're late, right, you're late to school and your teachers don't like that. We're late to work and our bosses don't like that. So we've got to figure this out, okay? So you're not telling them what they need to do about it. You're just identifying what the problem is for them, identifying what the problem is for you, okay? And then encouraging that collaboration piece, that problem-solving piece. Okay, so you don't want to be the last one upstairs in the morning, and I can't be late for work. How are we going to solve this? What can we do? Well, you could come upstairs with me while I get dressed. Well, I could do that. You're right, but then I can't get dressed. I can't get ready and pack lunch or pack backpacks, whatever it is. So that's a good idea, but what else could we do? I could bring my clothes downstairs and get dressed downstairs. Bingo, right? That was the child's idea. It was what you wanted to get to, but telling them to do that would have been the solution back in the second star bullet here, right? And we're not trying to give them the solution. We want them to tell us what it is that could be the problem-solving skills. So now he goes on in the video to show we've not only now modeled language and a process for problem-solving for the child, but we've also done and managed some frustration for the adult. Right? It's a positive interaction, even though we weren't necessarily smiling and hugging and patting backs, but there was no negativity there, right? It wasn't you're in trouble, I'm late, you're late, now this whole storm has begun, right? What's the problem? Well, how come you can't come downstairs on time? Okay, well, because of that, this is what's happening. What are we going to do to solve it? And that's going to happen a lot, right? It's not a one-time fix. Because the next day, guess what? He might be late again. Hey, remember we chatted about this yesterday? Remember you said you wanted to bring your clothes downstairs? Yeah, let's go get them. Let's bring them on down, right? And we're having that conversation again. Okay, so I saw some chat box things come up. What can I help you with? Yeah, collaborating with the child, exactly. And that, again, is back, and we'll get to this in the next slide, around that relationship building with students.
So along these same lines, I was just thinking, I had read a book once on guidance around this entire topic, and I can't find it online right now, and I can't find my copy, but it's called Lost at School. It's the Plan B approach, and it basically is the collaborating and understanding that kids can generally know what will help them. And a lot of times adults are so kind of wrapped around about how, in their head, how they want things to go. And they have to be a little bit more follow the child and actually have a conversation with them. And it does work. Yes, I think it is Ross Green. I think that is, yep.
So, and that's funny you say that, Marcy. In Dr. Ablon's video here, his sort of spotlight on this and his direction to this is directly related and from Dr. Green's book, The Explosive Child.
Yep. It's and I actually will tell you, I have used after reading that book, I was like so pumped. This is so great. And I actually used that Plan B process in the classroom with a child with incredibly challenging behaviors. And it really worked. He was like, it immediately gave him a feeling of he was being respected. And he was a climber, and he was on top of things that I don't even know how he got there. And it was very dangerous. And so that was the conversation we had around it. And he was like, you know what, you're right. And here's what I could do. And I'm like, you know what? But he immediately took ownership of that. And it was amazing. But.
Good, thanks. Okay. So I jumped the gun a little bit, but here I'll show you this.
So I thought I would just give a very quick example of what that might look like.
I got ahead of myself.
So I'll use the example of the first example I gave, a common problem, which is everybody in a household getting up, getting dressed, getting breakfast, packing their stuff, etc., and getting off to school and work on time. And if that doesn't go well, that's a bad start to the day for all involved. So what does this process look like? Collaborative problem solving. Well, the first thing is it's predictable. So the last time you want to solve a predictable problem is right when the problem's happening. You want to do that proactively. So it looks like this. First, a good deal of empathy to clarify the kid's concern. Hey, you know what we've noticed? We've noticed that the mornings have been pretty tough. And when we're asking you to get dressed in the morning, sometimes you're not getting dressed. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. What's going on? What's up? I don't know. Well, think about it for a second. I mean, do you think maybe you're not so wild about going to school? No? So you're okay about going to school? I like school. Huh, okay, an 8-year-old who likes school, great. So what else could be getting in the way? Is it something about getting dressed? No? Huh, well, because sometimes when we're waiting downstairs with your sister and we're all ready to go, we come upstairs and you were supposed to be getting dressed and we just see you sitting next to your clothes. So what do you think it could be? I don't want to be last. Oh, you don't want to be last. So like it's a race or something, you think? No. So it's not a race. Well, why would you not want to be last then? Because I don't want to be upstairs alone. You don't want to be upstairs alone. How come? I don't know. Do you get like nervous or something? Maybe. Huh. So you don't want to be left alone upstairs if everybody else is downstairs. You might get a little bit nervous. That sound right? And notice all we did was ask some questions. We took some guesses. We provided some reassurance that we were really genuinely interested. And we reflected what we've heard. And now we know the kid's concern, and now it's time to put our concern on the table. And what's that going to look like? Not our solution. It's going to look like putting our concern on the table. Hey, you know what? We're just worried about everybody getting out the door on time in the morning, so we start the morning off okay, and everybody gets to work and school on time. Here comes the third ingredient. Don't solve the problem for the kid. So, you know what? I bet there's something we can do so that you're not having to be upstairs alone, which makes you sort of nervous, but we can all still get out the door on time and start the morning okay. And then one of the hardest things for us adults to do, bite our tongue. You got any ideas? And let the kid take first crack at it. And in the example that I'm giving you, well, the kid's first idea was, well, you could wait upstairs while I get dressed. And mom said, well, I could do that, but then you'd have to get dressed quickly enough because I got to get downstairs and start making lunches and stuff like that. So I'm worried that if you don't do it quickly, I'm going to have to go downstairs. And then what does the kid say? Well, how about if I take my clothes downstairs and get dressed downstairs? Great idea. Who wins? Everybody. Who loses? Nobody. Problem solved, challenging behavior reduced, morning starting off better, helping relationship enhanced, and skills practiced and trained. Notice this was a trial in problem solving, in flexibility, in frustration tolerance, and one of the coolest things about this is not just for the child. Guess who else is practicing problem solving, flexibility, frustration tolerance? The adult as well.
Sweet. I gave you a nice little snippet of that. Okay, let me switch this back here. So Dr. Ablon's example is a great one, but it's for a family at home, right? And we're not all working at home with our students during renewal day. So I'm wondering, how could this information transfer for you into the school setting? Okay, what's an example where we, the adult, could collaboratively interact with the child to get to a problem, to solve a problem, and to monitor those, or model those skills? Okay, does anybody have any examples or things that you're thinking? I'm seeing things come in the chat room, so practicing my wait time for anybody that wants to chat live, but I'm also just reading some of the things that are coming in there. Okay, so some questions and some great suggestions there. So what I'm seeing too is I see some thoughts around specific activities. So like a literacy activity, right? And if the child is struggling during this time, having this and sort of practicing this approach during then. I'm also seeing it come up. Oh, getting snowsuits on, right? Transitioning outside, that can be a really chaotic time. Or transitioning at any point, whether you're leaving the bus and coming into the school, or leaving the classroom to go to art class, or leaving the classroom to go to lunch, right? Those physical transitions can be big, cause a lot of struggles for students. Writing in general, yeah. When a student isn't prepared, yeah. When they refuse to line up at recess, I've seen that before. Getting ready at PE, lining up, yeah. So a lot of those examples, oh, fire drills, that's a great one. A lot of these examples look like transition times of the day for me. So that tells me that there's potentially a step missing prior to the transition itself, like a preparation step, right? So talking to a group of students, or if there's one in particular that continuously struggles during that time, around prepping them, right? So right now we're in block center. In a few minutes, Miss Nicole's going to ring the bell, and it's going to be time to clean up, okay? And then wait a minute. Remember, in 3 minutes, Miss Nicole's going to ring the bell, right? And starting to prep and prepare that student for what's coming next. Remind me how we act, or remind me how we walk to get our coat on. Remind me how or show me how we walk to the lunchroom without touching, the pictures on the wall or what have you, right? So sometimes that can be a simple one. But if it's a continuous outburst or continuous behavior, then keeping what Dr. Ablon was just modeling in mind, right? Tell me about why this is. How come when the bell rings, you find yourself screaming or hiding, right? What is it about that loud noise that makes your body want to do that? It hurts my ears, or it startles me, or it reminds me of, a poor memory that the child has had in the past or something. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's what happened and that that's what that was causing you to do. Well, when that bell rings, that tells us that, if it's a fire alarm, that tells us that there might be an emergency and that it's not safe to stay in this classroom, so we have to leave the classroom. So when the bell rings, the fire alarm rings, and you feel like you want to hide, and we know that that's not a safe thing to do, what could we do instead? Because sometimes fire alarms, teachers don't know they're happening, right? Sometimes it's a drill, we might have a heads up. Sometimes it's not. So we've got to proactively address those situations, giving them a warning, right? Okay. So somebody had asked if some of the conversation and information earlier was coming from chapter 3. So yes, some of it is coming. So remember, we talked about this book, Uncover the Roots, Challenging Behaviors, and how it has a lot of gardening references. So chapter 3 and chapter 4 are helping us to sort of get back to basics with just getting to know our students. In the book, they call them your buds, of course, right? Get to know your buds. So starting to build those strong relationships with students. And like I said, some students are harder to bond with. They're harder to make that connection with. That doesn't mean we stop. Okay, so one thing, there's a variety of ideas in the chapters around how to build strong relationships. But these 3, I think, were pretty poignant ones that were worth reiterating. So using their names, right? Not calling them friend, boy, girl, hey, everyone, right? Using their names. Good morning, Marcy, right? It's time to clean up, Nicole, right? Or, Mike, I noticed that you, whatever, sat quietly during whole group, walked in the hallway, right? Using their names, getting their attention, right? Making eye contact, getting to their level, right? That's all part of building a strong relationship. Another part is this idea that we've mentioned earlier around positive interactions, right? Boosting our interactions from coming from a negative, no, don't, you can't approach to a more positive, I noticed that, whatever it is you noticed, right? I saw that when you were playing in the block area, you gave Tommy the block he was asking for. Nice work. That was great sharing, right? They're having those positive interactions. Tell me about what happened on the bus. I heard you might have had a hard time, right? What was it about the bus ride this morning that made your day start off on the wrong foot, right? What happened before? What happened at home, right? Was mom upset? Were you late? Asleep? Were they approaching it from a calm, friendly, I want to be your friend approach? And then incorporating children's interests. So this stems back to, well, of course, the title, Get to Know Your Buds, but knowing what makes your students tick. They're coming in from so many different experiences and so many different backgrounds. Some children spend a lot of time with their families on the weekend fishing. Other children don't leave their homes, right? They stay in their structure, in their home, and wherever it is that may be, and they just have what they have in the house, right? They don't go out and do and have experiences like other children might. So you have to get to know, what is it about that student that they like? What do they enjoy? It might be a video game. It might be a sport. It might be a hobby. It might be some type of a food or some type of a recipe, right? You don't know unless you ask and start to get to know them. And sometimes it's not just about asking, tell me what your favorite activity is outside of school. Sometimes it's a roundabout way. What'd you do this weekend? Oh, you went to the park? You went to the park last weekend. Do you like it there? Ah, that park is pretty cool. You know what I like about that park? The slide. Did you notice they put in a new slide? And starting to connect with them, even if it's not true on your end, it doesn't matter. They don't need to know that. But starting to connect with them about what they like, making those connections. And we've been talking with teachers during this whole COVID closure, and a lot of them have been trying to stay in touch with their students through Zoom and just different video conferencing platforms. And we laugh, but the students all, they bring their dog on the camera, they bring over their fish, or they bring over, some new toy that they've gotten recently. They're literally now showing you something that they want to show off to their friends and to you. And when you start to notice and pick those things up, you start to make connections not only with that student, but among students to each other, right? Like, oh, Marcy, you have a dog? I just got a new dog. Tommy got a new dog too. We all have new dogs. That's so great. We have that in common. And that, it sounds so silly, but it's how you start to make those connections and identify their interests. And then you can also, in a situation where it's tense, or when you're back in the classroom and a challenging behavior arises, then you can sort of reach into your child knowledge back pocket that you have on this student and pull that out. Hey, you're having a hard time, or once the student is calmed down and they're willing to talk, and like Marcy said, maybe not talking about what just happened, but sort of shifting gears and saying, tell me about the park this weekend. Did you go? What'd you do? I went by, I didn't see you. I wish I would have seen you. Something like that, right? And just bringing up a different topic that you can connect with them on. Another thing that she has in the book is sort of this, what does she call it? I don't want to get it wrong for you. But it's this, I should have had it tabbed. But it's written on the bottom here. It's like every child's right, Bill of Rights, that's what it's called. It's the Children's Bill of Rights. And knowing that every single child, regardless of their background, regardless of their experiences, regardless of their attention in class or challenging behaviors, has the right to be heard, the right to be safe, the right to kindness. Okay? They have the right to be a child and an individual. And it's our task as their educator to honor that to them and to treat them the way they need to be treated in the moment by building that strong relationship and getting that going for them. Okay. So I'm just going through the chat box real quick, and I see a couple things around positive interactions, not necessarily having to be verbal, right? Giving them the thumbs up, or giving them a quick nod and a wink or something that shows them that you saw, you noticed, and hey, good job. Right? Yeah, and I've seen a lot of things too around greeting students in the morning when they come in and giving them sort of that choice. If you've seen those videos, high fives, fist pumps, hugs, pats on the backs, nothing. right? Giving that sort of that power to the child. You're going to greet them no matter what, but how you greet them is up to them. Praising the little things, yeah. Yeah, I saw that too, Joanna. Some teachers sending home little pictures like the flat Stanley, but they're pictures of themselves. School is the only time for that, for a pro-social interaction with adults. That's exactly right, Manuel. We don't know where they're coming from or what level of interaction they're having at home. Positive, negative, adult, peer-to-peer, right? You can't assume one way or the other. You just need to be that consistent person for them. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. So any lingering questions, not necessarily just about child interactions, but about other topics we've covered as well, the active supervision or the classroom factors. I did notice some things in the chat box. I'm just going to scroll up while folks chime in. So one thing that they do cover in this book as well, I've seen it kind of come up a little bit in the chat box, is the importance of family engagement with all students in settings. And when a child has a regular ed teacher, an ed tech, perhaps a one-on-one, maybe they go to Title I and have teachers there, when they start to have all of these adults in their life, it's really and even more important for the family to have knowledge of that, right? Sometimes families don't even realize how many adults their child is interacting with on any given day. And sometimes the adults themselves in the school setting don't realize how many interactions that child is having with adults a day. And that can be really confusing if everybody's coming at them in different angles, right, for different purposes, or have different expectations, behaviorally, academically, whatever it may be. Right, good. So I sometimes when we have these conversations about the kids, it makes us sort of miss and want to get back in touch with them and back in the classrooms with them. So my hope is that having these conversations will start to energize folks to get back there. Won't be anytime soon, obviously, but thinking ahead at some of the ways we could start a new school year off fresh, whether it's in person or remotely, with some things. And I don't have the answers for you. I'm just sort of charging you with thinking about this for yourselves and with your partner teachers, thinking about ways to start the year off on a strong, positive foot with these interactions and these relationship building skills and strategies with students. Yes, Mary, you're right. Some kids are hardly in the classroom. They're pulled out for so many specials or just different focuses. So, and it's so more important for all of those adults to talk and be in touch about what's working and what isn't working when given interactions with that child. So we can continue the chat box, continue calling out. It is just about 10 minutes shy of when we need to be wrapping up, which is just fine. But I did just want to post some information for next week. The next week will be the last conversation on challenging behaviors specifically. So we'll be looking at proactive strategies and conflict resolution. Those will mostly be pulled from the book that I mentioned, Uncover the Roots. For those that want to watch recordings, if you're not able to make it next week or missed some of the other two, those are available here as well. Okay, certificates. This is the best part of everybody's day, right? So if you're watching this live here now today, you can either, I'm going to copy this as well, access it, oops, oh crud, I know why, hold on. You can either access the certificate through the link or use the QR code. Now, mind you, the glitch in the certificate thing is that it sends out 100 certificates a day. So that's where it was an issue for us, because there's more than 100 of you. So it was sort of like a first come, first serve. So like, for example, today, 20 of you wouldn't get the certificate. So what I had to do was, you can still access it through this QR code and through this link. That works well, but the certificate won't automatically be generated to you this time. I'll just send it. I'll go in later and send it. That's my hope. If you're watching this, for those that are watching the recording later, then you have a different link and a different certificate to access. Got to keep it separated because it causes a lot of confusion.